As part of the Trump's administration crackdown on immigrants, a number of civilians had been brutally killed in Minnesota, triggering nationwide outrage. Hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets, even in sub-zero weather, to protest these inhumane policies and acts of violence. On May 25, 2020, 46-year-old George Floyd was killed by a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This too happened under a Trump administration. However, Floyd was not an immigrant. He was an American citizen treated as if he weren't because of his race. But why Minnesota? To understand, we have to go far back in history and examine its deeper significance. Minnesota's history begins long before it became a state. For more than 12,000 years, this land was home to indigenous peoples, primarily the Dakota and the Anishinaabe. Rivers were central to life, trade, and belief. Pedoti, where the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers meet, was sacred to the Dakota and was believed to be the center of the world. That world was dismantled through colonization. Beginning in the 1600s, French fur traders entered the region, followed by missionaries, soldiers, and settlers. Through treaties repeatedly violated by the US government, indigenous nations were forced to surrender millions of acres of land. After years of broken promises, starvation, and land theft, violence erupted in 1862. The aftermath was devastating. Mass execution, imprisonment, and the forced expulsion of the Dakota from Minnesota. Minnesota also practiced slavery, despite federal bans and widespread denials in later historical narratives. Enslaved people were held at Fort Snelling with the support of the US Army. Dred and Harriet Scott lived there while enslaved, and their later Supreme Court case helped reinforce slavery across the country. Slavery in Minnesota only formally ended when the state entered the Union in 1858. Out of this history, Minneapolis emerged. The city was built around St. Anthony Falls, where water power fueled industry. Lumber came first, followed by flour milling. By the 19th century, Minneapolis became the flour milling capital of the world, and this transformation depended on labor, especially immigrant labor. Immigrants worked the farms, railroads, mills, and factories that sustained the city's growth, and as industry expanded, so did Minneapolis. Between 1870 and 1890, the city's population surged. Across Minnesota as a whole, immigration reshaped society. By the late 1800s, about 40% of the state's population was foreign-born, far higher than the national average. Most immigrants came from Germany, Norway, and Sweden, drawn by industrial jobs and access to land. In the early 20th century, Mexican farm workers arrived fleeing poverty and revolution. Over time, they formed communities tied to agriculture, manufacturing, and food processing. In later decades, refugees from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam also arrived after escaping war. All of these wars, it is worth noting, were conflicts in which the United States was deeply involved. Another major shift occurred in the early 1990s. Somalis displaced by civil war were granted US visas. Many settled in Minnesota, drawn by employment opportunities and existing community networks. Minneapolis, especially the Cedar Riverside neighborhood, became home to one of the largest Somali communities in the world. So while Minnesota and Minneapolis were built through immigration, that welcome was always conditional. Immigrants were needed for labor, but were often marginalized, monitored, and politically targeted. Indigenous people were displaced. Enslaved people were controlled. Immigrants were essential, but rarely protected. This is the city where George Floyd was killed. And this is the state now targeting immigrants with harsh crackdowns. These moments are not isolated. They are part of a long history of controlling land, labor, and race. A history that continues to shape who is protected and who is deemed expendable under US imperialism.